session we will basically focus on software development lifecycle, and this is basically a part when we complete before we start planning and monitoring chapter or knowledge area in BABOK version number 3. So this session is going to be comprehensive, and also will cover every part. It means the first part we will cover about the SDLC. That's a general what is a software development life cycle or the project management life cycle. Both are different, but we will try to cover them. Okay, the project has a broader term, and software is a part of the project basically. Okay, but when we talk about the project management, there will be other areas are also involved. Okay, like for example, the before we decide what kind of a software we want to build, then there is a lot of analysis goes on, and there is some strategy related discussions happens, and also we also think about different ways we want to basically implement a software. Okay, so that's what it happens, and then when it actually comes to the software development, that's where the SDLC plays a role. But after once the software is developed, then during the implementation and post implementation, we also consider the knowledge sharing sessions, and also take the feedback and fine tune the solution. So those are part of your project management. Okay, so let us basically go ahead and understand this SDLC in general first, and then we will basically also align business analyst role along with the SDLC or the phases of the SDLC. What role you will be playing at each phase, that is very important for us to know. And along with that, you will also will come to know about what are the different the methodologies are available, or different software development what we call the frameworks are there. For example, we will also learn about the traditional and modern, and again in between, that's a fusion. Okay, so we will learn first A is that waterfall, then we will learn the RUP, that is rational unified process, and then we will learn agile, and then we will also learn the difference between these three and how do we make a decision which one is more suitable. Okay, so this is what is a structure of this particular training. So it is, we are going to basically break the session into 4 areas. Part 1, we will only study the concept of SDLC. Okay, and we will also learn in detail about the each phase and the business analyst role within that each phase. Okay, and second part we will emphasize on RUP, and in that it's quite extensive because RUP complement the other the what we call methodologies what we will learn. RUP has a slightly different the approach, and that approach is quite a bit appreciated, and also it's in demand in nowadays, so we will learn those as well because that's basically quick turnaround. And then we will talk about the agile, and within agile we will see what are the different the approaches or the methodologies are there, and we will take one example, and we will first understand all the characteristics and the difference and the principles of agile, and then we will take one that is Scrum, and we will learn the Scrum in detail. Okay, so this is all about basically a structure for learning the software development lifecycle. Okay, so let's start with the book which I will just share with you. Just give me 1 second. I'm not sure whether you have received the book, but I hope you have received. In case if you have not received, you may get in touch. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead here. I guess it's chapter number 2. Yes. Okay. So the page number may be different. The reason is we keep updating the book and add more content and enrich. That's ongoing process. So the page number what you see here and in the book may be slightly different. It's almost the same, but we do keep enriching the whole book ongoing basis. Okay. So this is what we are going to learn is 2.0 software development life cycle. Okay. And here it is. If you see the phases we have mentioned, it's actually the diagram looks very not legible. Let me see if I can increase this and make it to 500. But we are going to basically cover all this part in detail, so don't worry about if you don't see the diagram. Okay. If you see, we have here mentioned the initiation phase, system concept development. Then we have is a planning phase. Then we have is requirement analysis phase. Then design phase. Then construction phase. Okay, and so on. So I'll just reduce that and let's basically go through these phases in detail. Okay. Okay, here is the beginning now. Let's basically start with initiation phase. The initiation phase of the project begins when the business need is identified in terms of a problem or an opportunity. Now, this is basically what we have learned in the last session. What is the problem or what is an opportunity, and how do we basically define them in the business need? Anyone has any queries? Okay, there is. Can you please all mute? It's a huge noise in the session. Okay, and in case if you are outside and in the noisy place, which I really don't appreciate, but in case there is any unavoidable situation, if you are there, I would request you to communicate through chat. Okay, that would be really nice, so that there is a silence, or I would say noiseless session, Okay, so we have in the last session we talked about the business need and how the business needs are basically identified in terms of the problem or an opportunity. Now again, I'm going to give you an example. A problem could be the team needs a reporting tool, or the organization may need to basically address a new regulatory requirement that requires the organization to send the data in a particular format to a local or federal government. See, so in that case you are looking at building a new tool or application that would basically cater to this requirement. Okay, that's again a problem. Or organization may want to basically what we call provide additional services, or they may also want to basically leverage the new product or services, and also uh, ensure that they stay ahead in the competitions, so they have a competitive edge. So this is basically various ways the business need is identified. Okay, and now I'm going to basically the highlight here. Once the business analyst analyzes the and defines the problem area or the opportunity, an impact analysis is done to understand the impact of the problem or the opportunity on overall business to define the future action. This is again important for us to understand. Once we define the problem or the opportunity, that's a problem definition or the business need document that we will go through and end of the SDLC. Okay. Uh, Once we finish this identifying the problem or the new opportunity, we basically document that and also get the sign off. In this process, we may need to meet some stakeholders to understand the problem and the impact. Because the problem what we identified may not be the same as once we start basically analyzing that or understanding the impact area. that is been captured again in the problem definition or business need. Okay. So, and based on the problem definition, we could define the future course of action. Okay, so this is a problem and this is a possible solution. Now here we are talking about at a very high level, and this may change over a period of time when we basically analyze it further. Okay. The project manager may be appointed at this stage to evaluate the feasibility of the solution. Now, this we are talking about when we say there could be a possible solution, then project manager would analyze and see whether the solution is possible. And they may also basically, if the solution is identified as a doable, project manager will then present the estimation of cost and schedule. Now this is coming from the project manager, and we will basically use that data to further analyze and prepare our business case. Okay, of the new solution based on high level requirement in terms of the features and functionality of the solution. So here at the high level we have basically defined the solution, what it will look like, and those are the high level features or functionalities are specified. Again, when we are talking about the high level features and the functionalities, we still need to do a lot of analysis to capture the detail level requirement, and that will be done only during elicitation stage. At this stage we are only talking about a very high level, the solution and the solution structure. Okay. The business need document in a concept proposal or a terms of reference. So here we are documented. There is also another type of document. You can put it as a concept proposal, business need document, or terms of reference. In this case, I want to mention that terms of reference is it's a lot more detailed than the business need document, because in the terms of reference document you may also include other areas, for example the governance, the stakeholder names, and the problem area, and the possible solutions, or the how it will be implemented in a very high level. Okay. So, and in if that is basically prepared if it is prepared in the detail level, that might basically be used as a business case instead of basically preparing different documents like a business need document, a solution concept, and again we are talking about the business case. Business case I will just mention here is about we present the solution and cost and timeline. Along with that we also present the benefit, the cost versus benefit analysis. This is an investment, this is a possible benefits, and that is the business case. That also covers benefit versus risk. What are the benefits we are talking, but what are the risk we may face, because any change when we introduce, there is bound to be some the risk associated with that. The risk could be business or process, it could be the operations, it could be related to the technology as well. Okay. And again, of course, this also could be related to employees or the people working in the organization. Now we talk about after the concept proposal is approved, the system concept development phase will begin. Okay. So here now summarizing, what we are doing is basically A is defining the business need document that will cover your problem area definition or the opportunity or idea. Okay, so that is one part, and either you can create the business need document or the concept proposal or the terms of reference, either of them, and all this is done by business analyst. So that is your role during initiation phase. Any question? In case if you are doing PMBA role, then you are expected to basically also prepare the cost and schedule and present that to the team. That's a stakeholder or another team. Okay, so here that could be a dual role. There are many organizations have this dual role, especially PMBA role. Okay. Now in the next part we are talking about phases. System concept development phase. In the system concept, when the business need is approved by stakeholders, what does it mean by business need? Means they have identified the problem, I mean they have analyzed and accepted the problem definition document which you have presented. In case if there are any queries, they have basically raised them, that I suppose you have taken care of them, and after that they have signed off. It means we all are on the same page when it comes to the problem definition. So we all know the problem and the possible solution we will talk about now here. Okay, the solution enters into the next phase to define and detailing the solution scope. Now, solution scope, you will see that, okay, when we talk about the problem, we are talking about the possible solutions. Again, here, when we are talking about solution scope is at a very high level. So, we are, here it will be a context diagram, or it could be a boundary, solution boundaries defined. So what will be part of that and what will not be? So this is a very high level boundaries basically prepared. So what we say is that during this phase, business analyst, project manager, stakeholders define the boundaries and review the proposed solution for further viability and suitability. So whether the solution is viable, doable, suitable, profitable, all those things are basically analyzed at this stage. This is very important because when we are proposing any change, the change should be in line with the organizational goal and objective. Also, it should be suitable from the organization perspective, that is organization's capability in terms of the, again, operations capability, technology capability, or you're talking about the people and the skill sets and so on and so forth. Okay, so here the business analyst role is basically he will basically create a context diagram to define the system boundary, and he further uses high level use cases. That's basically high level, that will define the high level features or the functionalities, and data modeling diagrams to define the solution scope. Now there are two parts. If you see, one is basically high level use cases will talk about the features and functionalities, and data modeling diagram basically will define the solution scope. Okay, so these are the two different parts are there. So they both will complement in defining your solution scope. Okay, I'm just going to go find out the high level the diagram. Just give me 1 second. I'm just scrolling down now. It's somewhere here. I guess it's a bit of slow because many applications are running simultaneously. Okay, see, you could also use, this is the high level okay. This is a scope modeling where we are showing the system from different perspective. If you see what is in the scope, let me just bring it to the 200%. This is one way. If you see that online banking solution, here is a scope is mentioned in different way. If you see what is in the scope, login, transact, the statement of transaction, request, these are the functionalities, and here the customer is interacting online. Customer is also these are the functionalities, and customer interacting on online banking solution, right? And this solution is connected through the basically core banking solutions, and also the customer has an option. This basically system is used by branch as well as the federal government, federal bank, that's a RBI, for the regulatory related requirement. Okay, this is, if you see, this is your high level use case. A high level use case is, if you see the use case, we will study in detail at later stage, but at this stage what we need to learn is that these are the oval shape, basically they represent your functionality. Okay, so how the actor could be anyone who's interacting with the system, and how he will interact with the system, and these are the oval shapes are basically functionalities. If you see here, it is a functionalities: login, view the personal details, fund transfer, right? So these are the functionalities, it is high level, and within the login he's basically sending the password and user ID to login, right? And in the view personal details, is extending the update personal detail as an option. Fund transfer, he may use do the intrabank and interbank. And there's another actor, if you see, he's a back office user here, and he talks about generate the central bank related file, what we report they wants to send a bank, each branch will send it to the bank, right? Federal bank, that's what it is. That is how the federal bank will monitor each individual bank. And again, they may also upload some response file if they have some what we call queries sent to the back office or a bank, right? And they also sent some routine reports. And here it is, one more thing is system admin, he takes the backup, and he also involved in exception handling. So this is how the high level use case may look like, but depending on the project you may have more functionalities, or it could be more complex as well. But this is a simple examples what we have taken in order to basically teach you all about how it looks like. Okay, and let me just go through one more question. Okay, you can also use the system overview like this. Here it is it's more used for the business stakeholders. The customers are interacting online banking solution, they are also going to the branch, so they have an option basically to do the banking. And the bank and the online banking both are using the core banking solution, and this is also used by this is also communicating with RBI, that is your federal bank. And also the same this core banking solution is using SMS, that is text message services, for sending the OTP, one time password, right, for secure transactions. And it also interact with the back office for providing if you see, it is only one way, it is only they are connecting, it should be both way. The back office people, whenever they have any queries, they will send and get the details. They may also serve the customers to provide the account related queries. Okay, so this could be also a solution overview. So there are different ways you can basically present. And if you see, this is also another way of providing the context, the diagram. In this case, presentation layer, what the user will see in the front. Okay, that is a the web servers, they will not see obviously, but they will see the user management, account statement, fund transfers, customer data, and request once they log in. These are the part they will see. This will also in basically does another is application layer, where all the calculations are done, and any information they want to present in a different way, all these things are done here. And the second, then next level is basically database layer, where they basically fetch the data. But it is simply data is fetched here, but this is the middle layer basically will present the data in a structured way to the presentation layer, right? So all the calculations and security features and processing happens in the middle level. Okay, so this could be one way of basically presenting. So this is what we are talking about, solution scope. I'm just checking if there is any data modeling diagram is there. Hold on. That's in a different chapter. We will go through this in detail at later stage. Right now we only need to see what it looks like for you all. Hold on, I just, for some reason it is, yes. Just give me 1 second. This system is pretty slow today. It was just I saw the data modeling diagram and it just, okay. This is a sample data modeling diagram, which basically talks about the data, how what how the database will be structured, what are the tables, and if you see here, what kind of a data will be used, and from here the data requirement, basically we can define the solution scope. And this is also basically help you to basically understand how your system will interact with other systems. Okay, so this is the basically high level data requirement, so we can basically present that into the data modeling diagram. But when we talk about the data modeling at later stage, we will actually learn the entire concept of data modeling, and the relationship between the entities and how they are defined, and what are the different ways of basically presenting the data, and data, what are the like a ER diagram is one way, and also other one is a class diagram, like that. So there are different ways you can do the data modeling, and then we will also do the practical session at later stage. Okay, so this is your data modeling. The reason I wanted to take you here and to show you exactly, so that you get the picture in your mind what exactly we are talking about. Okay, so otherwise it becomes very difficult to visualize. And these are the two things what we required us to basically define the solution scope at a very high level at initial stage. Okay, if you are reading the requirement engineering book at that time also, it is basically mentioned. There are the solution scopes or the context diagram basically is mentioned in detail, and they talk about the people, process, and the systems that are getting affected, and from there we basically define the system scope or the system boundary. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead with SDLC again. Now we were here. This provides more insight about volume of work and the required time and budget for realizing the solution. Okay, so in terms of the features and functionalities and the data that will be required for the particular project will help us out to understand the nature and the volume of the project. Okay, and based on that, project manager will present their cost and schedule estimation for the project. Once rational and realistic solution scope, budget and schedules are prepared and reviewed, it is then presented to the sponsor to avail the approval and funding for the solution. This is again very important factor. Without this we just can't move ahead. We need a funding. Okay, so here we are presenting the solution scope. In that we talked about the features, functionalities and the data and the processes all at the high level, and based on that we will present the volume of work it is required and the budget and the schedule. That will be, these are before we present to the sponsor, it is basically presented to the stakeholders, and their queries and the feedbacks are incorporated. Again they are presented and taken the sign off before we present to the next to the sponsor. Okay, in because there are a lot of assumptions are taken place here when we basically prepare the business case. The reason is the assumptions or hypotheses are there when it comes to cost versus benefit analysis. We have got the cost, but the benefit is basically based on certain assumption. For example, if you introduce the new e-commerce solution, then what we are talking about is we will say, okay, number of visitors coming and number of visitors buying the product, right? And based on that number of commission we may expect from this what we call from the transactions, right? So those are the different and what is a growth is also basically projected based on that. What is the current what is the initial stage, the number of customers may join, and the what is the volume of business will be handled at initial stage and how gradually it will increase over a period of time. Okay, so this is basically what we talk about the projecting the business growth. In addition, the business analyst, project manager, and stakeholders need to justify the investment in the solution by providing detailed calculation on profitability and return on investment, payback period, or break-even calculations. It means this is definitely the most important factor before we get the funding. We have to prepare that the cost versus benefit or the return on investment. It means that we are talking about the cost of the solution. That is, it is included everything. It includes the solution as well as implementing the change, and the change will also include your the increase in the capacities if it is required, and also providing the training, and if you need to set up the operations for maintaining the solution, that also cost is involved. It's just not the cost of development. So you'll have to basically consider all this factor so that in order to provide the operating cost of the solution. So that is one. And then we provide that, okay, what is the profitability, how we will basically generate the revenues, and at what point there will be a break even, or at what point we will receive we will have we will recover the investment, right? So that is what we need to project. Again, depends on the industry, the break even time may be different. Somewhere it could be 12 months, 18 months, or it could be up to even 10 years also. But of course, the ideally people would consider around 2 years or something. Okay. And here it is, along with the cost versus benefit, we also need to do the risk analysis. So we are talking about the expected benefits, okay, versus expected risk. Again, the risks are basically we have identified. There may be also risk which we have not identified at this stage. So is it worth taking the risk? That is important. Benefit means if we go ahead, we will have benefits, and then those we can list, tangible, intangible. But if we do not go ahead, then what are the risks we may face? It could be facing the penalty if it is regulatory requirement. it could be what we call impact on the brand value if we have outdated systems. Okay, it could be various the risk may be involved. Okay, the business case presented by the business analyst is found satisfactory. The sponsor may sponsor the development work for the solution. Now, sponsors, when you present, you as a business analyst will be preparing with help of project manager and stakeholders. But when you present it, you may face many queries. And when you answer those queries, you may also what we call get the funding for the development work. It could be all the funding could be sanctioned, or it could be with some conditions. For example, if you implement phase 1, then you will get the funding for the phase 2 and so on. Or it could be they may give a funding for first 2 phases initially, 2 or 3 phases, and based on the what we call development work and the progress, they may basically fund remaining part, so those are basically fundings are also based on different conditions. Again, it is at discretion of your sponsor how confident he feels in your basically business case, and also how important is that particular project, so based on that the funding will be decided. Question? If no question, I go to the next level, that's the planning phase. We talk about the planning phase. The project planning starts when once the sponsor approves the funding. Okay, after reviewing the solution in the form of high level solution features, functionality, risk, overall feasibility and profitability of delivering the solution. That means he will also review the business need documents, solution scope documents along with the business case document. Okay, and once the funding is done, then that's where the planning phase will start. Now here there are 2 types of plannings may be involved. One is that while business analyst is busy with planning phase for requirements, the project manager will be basically busy with the overall project basically planning. Okay, so and in terms of the business analyst, this is part of the PMP. Yes, well, PMP is it is part, but the project manager's planning is slightly different than the business analyst planning, because the business analyst is primarily focusing on the more of the requirement related the planning, and the project manager is also basically involved in planning the resources, the what we call the technology and other infrastructure related requirements. So basically he or she will ensure that they will put up all the what we call necessity requirements in order to start the project. Okay, and in case if the resource are there, so they will have a proper plan for ramping up the resources in a proper way. Okay, so here it is, if you see, business analysis will plan for the what kind of a business analysis deliverables are there, what are the stakeholder analysis are there, and the stakeholder analysis means who will be the stakeholders, we will identify them, what kind of engagement strategy we will have, and what kind of basically the engagement or the strategies we may need in order to basically keep the stakeholder interested in the project. Okay, and then we will also have the requirement information management, what kind of information we will manage, and again we will also talk about the project the governance, who are the stakeholders in the project, and what will be their roles and responsibilities, and how the decisions will be made within the particular project. That's your governance. And along with that also how often we will meet, and what is the tools or any particular way we will communicate, all of that is basically mentioned. And if there are any ongoing meetings are there, those are basically scheduled. Okay, those we will meet working committee once in 15 days, steering committee once in month or once in 2 months, then there could be a management or senior management committees once in a quarter, in order to these all the different committees are there and the roles are different, and the depending on the committee, then the project the updates and the progress are discussed. For example, if you are talking about the senior management, then at the time we may not get into the nitty-gritties of the requirement or the details. We may basically give them a heads up about the project progress, and if there are any risk and issues are there, and if anything is impacting the organization's current operations, or the future what we call plan or something. So all those things basically will be covered. And here, if you go to the next level, here the project manager works on a resource management, that is employee with particular skill sets. In case if they are not there, then they may have to hire, and plan for scaling up with the timeline. And IT resources, that is hardware, software, database, networking, communication channel, and other technical needs are basically considered. And to start with the solution and the solution development. Then the project manager may need to check if there is any special tool or specialized softwares are required for developing, testing, deploying the solution. Sometimes you may need a tool like a business object for generating the reports or something, or you may need any other tools for the testing also. If you need a test director or mercury quality centers, some those are the basically examples of some of the tools which are commonly used in project management, and those we have to basically plan well in advance, and this is the time, and we also have to see not only plan but also when how and when we will obtain those basically resources. Further, the detailed analysis is required for legal requirement for managing the data. Remember that depending on the project, what kind of a data will be generated and how the data will be managed. And if you see now, every applications or every organization's basically site we enter into, that they're talking about the data privacy. This data privacy has become a big issue, and it is also a government rule, and that is applicable to every organizations who is handling third party data or the customer data. And this is very important for the project manager to plan how the data will be collected or generated and how it will be maintained throughout its life cycle. It means that it's not only data is generated what we call during, but how it is maintained in its life cycle. For example, if it is e-commerce, then you will see there will be customers joining on regular basis, on daily basis. There will be new vendors joining on daily basis. And think about Amazon, the number of customers joining and number of customers providing their credit cards and their other details and what they buy, and basically how they basically get the delivery. All those are in very important data, and it is the organization's responsibility to protect that customer data. Okay, it could be also the law. For example, if it is a project is handling the patient's data in the healthcare industry, then it is as per the HIPAA law, the that particular healthcare industry or the hospital must basically protect the patient's data. Okay, so those are the law. Otherwise, if there is any data is leaked, then it might incur some penalty, or maybe loss of customers, or it could be even closure of business also. So that is how important this data management will be from the project perspective. In addition, project manager needs to check if any certificate and accreditation or vulnerability test is required to the solution to validate the quality of the solution. This is again extremely important when you are looking for the requirement, and some project do require this accreditation or vulnerability test. If it is a IT vendor or software company who is basically providing this software development solution or the software to their client may expect, or they may demand that they want to have a quality certification, and if that is part of your SLA, that is service level agreement, then this has to be included and planned well in advance. Okay, and this has to be basically communicated to the team as well. Okay. Project manager will review the plan to ensure that required capabilities are is delivered on time within the budget. This is again extremely important, within on time within budget. To achieve this, the detailed review is conducted along with other technical team members to estimate project resources, schedules, activities, tools, and other relevant data. So they project manager or the business analyst, they will have to work in a team to understand the actual needs before they plan and finalize the estimation. Again, this is estimation, it is not the actual basically plan. Okay, because everything will basically will be updated at later stage once we have a clear picture about the actual definition, actual the requirement and the requirement definitions, and what will be the approach for implementing the solution. So everything will change based on that part. Okay, any queries? If no queries, I'll move to the next level. Now this one here, if you see, requirement elicitation, analysis and documentation phase. Okay, so primarily many people would just name this as a requirement and analysis. Okay, or analysis and design, something like that. Okay, in the project management terms, this requirement analysis is only after solution is fully defined, after successful completion of eliciting the requirement from the stakeholders, documenting, scoping, verifying and validating the requirement. So there are various phases are there. When we talk about the elicitation analysis, we are planning for the elicitation, then we conduct the elicitation, we document the requirement, we send out the requirement to the stakeholders to confirm, and after the confirmation we are structuring those requirement in a particular template or framework. It is called usually template, and they could be like it could be business requirement document, that is BRD, or it could be functional requirement document, that is FRD. Okay, so that is a documenting and presenting that to the larger audience, and once you receive the feedback and incorporate those feedback into the document, then we obtain the sign off. Okay, so this is basically what we talk about the requirements. But here when we talk about the scoping and verifying and validating, the scoping is basically meant as that when we receive the requirement from the stakeholders, and at that time we may receive the actual need for that particular project and also the desire. So as a business analyst, you have to basically work with the team to ensure that all the needs are captured, and also they are separated from the desire what is expressed by the stakeholders. So those needs are basically part of the project baseline, and then desires can be used in the future for enhancing and enriching the solution at later stage. Okay, so that is what we talk about, the scoping the requirement. And once we scope, we verify the requirement. It means each and after completing the template, that's BRD or FRD, we verify the requirement to ensure that each requirement is correct, it is consistent, and it is cohesive. Okay, and it can be implemented, feasible and doable. Okay, that's a verification. You may have additional checklist based on the project and based on the organizational audit requirement. Some of the organization may have those verification guidelines given to the team, which you may have to follow and complete that. Okay, and validating basically to ensure that each and every requirement add a value to the solution. In case if any requirement does not add any value, then we may have to check whether it is required or it is not, so that then the further analysis will go on. So this is basically a short requirement life cycle. All this we will be basically learning in BABOK version number 3. These requirements can be presented or documented in the formal templates such as business requirement document, product roadmap, etc. Okay. Further, the defined solution is verified and validated against the organizational need and capability before it enters into the requirement analysis phase. Again, remember these things when we talk about the scoping. This is where we see once we have those requirement, and we will basically scope them as per the organizational need and the current capability. In case you are going to have some future capability later on and you want to accommodate those requirements at later stage, those can be basically consider them in the next phase or a future requirement. At requirement analysis, the business analyst prioritize the requirement based on the various criteria. Now we will talk about the prioritization in detail at later stage. Okay, but here it is important for us to know the requirement prioritization will happen at this stage once the requirements are fully defined. Okay, and these prioritizations are important basically to understand the baselining the project. Okay. Each requirement is fully defined in terms of functional, that is functionality and business rule, and non-functional, that is quality requirement such as system performance, security requirement, reliability, maintainability, and so on. There are various types of non-functional requirements are there. So those are also well defined, and usually these requirements are captured in functional requirement document, that is FRD. Those are your solution needs. And then we talk about the data, what kind of a data will be generated, and how the database will be structured. So these are your requirement. The requirements are further modeled using various modeling techniques for explaining it to reduce ambiguity, if any. Remember, explaining it to reduce ambiguity. The reason why do we want to say reduce ambiguity? These requirements are basically written in a what we call text format, or it is described. However, if you complement that along with the model or abstract version of that requirement, it will be easy for a reader to understand the intricacies. For example, if there is a process diagram, you have written step by step all the processes, and it is complemented with the process diagram, then it will reduce the ambiguity and also reduce the confusion, and it will improve the quality of understanding, quality of the requirement. That's what we mean. These techniques could be process diagram, activity diagram, use case diagram, state diagram, data modeling diagram, ER diagram, etc., as mentioned in the BA technique sections. So we are going to basically study all these techniques at later stage. Okay. So this is all primarily this particular phase is handled by business analyst. Okay. Once the requirements are defined in detail as per the stakeholders, that is business and technical needs for the system, the requirement design work will proceed. Okay. Each requirement must be measurable, testable, doable, consistent, correct, correlated, and concise to proceed. These are the qualities for the qualities for mentioned. It can be for each requirements, and you can, when you are verifying the requirement, ensure that these each requirement pass this test, or it has been verified against these criteria. These are your measurement criteria, or quality criteria, you may say. All these requirements are validated by tracing them back to the original business need and solution scope to ensure that every requirement is in line with the business need. This is nothing but validating the requirement. If any requirement found that it is not related or out of scope, it will be further analyzed if it is needed. Okay, so this is basically all talking about the validating the requirement. So in this paragraph, we are talking about the first line is primarily focusing on the requirement verification, and next two lines it is focusing on, next 2.5 lines focusing on validating the requirement. Question? Okay, if no questions, I move to the next phase, that is a design phase. The phase starts only after the solution is fully defined through requirement design, models, and documentation. And the same is verified and validated against its viability, doability, profitability, capability, for deploying it successfully in the user community. This we have already talked about. At this stage, the solution requirement, that is functional as well as non-functional requirement along with the constraint, is documented and it is presented and approved by relevant stakeholders. This is your ensuring that you present your the functional requirement document and obtain the sign off from all the relevant the stakeholders. Here it is relevant in terms we are talking about the business as well as technical team. Okay. If there are more than one solution options identified, each option is fully analyzed and ranked for selecting the final solution. Now, this is equally important because based on this ranking, you will basically select which solution is suitable for the particular project. Okay. This part is also mentioned in the BABOK. Once the solution is confirmed, the project manager and the team identify the physical characteristic of the system. These physical characteristic of the system and subsystem along with the processes allocated to them and their inputs and outputs are specified and the detailed design are prepared about the system and related subsystems. Now this is nothing but architectural diagram and this is done by an architect or the technical person. What they do basically, they will use they will refer the functional requirement document, understand the requirement and that's a functional, non-functional, data related requirement, and then they will basically design the system, subsystem, what are the inputs and how the inputs are basically obtained from and what are the outputs are there and what is the way the downstream systems are connected. So once they know, then they will also have all the requirement, for example the data related requirement interface and data conversion, any other tools and techniques required. So all those things are basically mentioned and the architectural diagrams are created. It is also possible, it's not that they'll prepare and it is approved, it is basically they will prepare, propose, and they may propose multiple options even in the architect design, and depending on the organization need and the stakeholders comfort, one or maybe more architectural option may be shortlisted or selected. Now here we talk about each subsystem is partitioned into one or more design unit or modules or components for development purpose, and detailed logical specifications are prepared for each solution module. After completion of due diligence, everything that is attributes requiring user inputs and other related approvals must be in place. So here we are talking about, in addition to what we just talked about the requirement, there will be also other areas will be also addressed. For example, the user inputs, due diligence, and any other basically factors that need to be considered. Okay, the architectural diagrams are prepared, presented, and approved for the development work. Once it is approved, maybe then we start with the development phase. Okay, so here the business analyst role is basically supporting the architect as well as other technical team to communicate the requirement and also the solution and the organizational goal. So once we and also support the stakeholders in bring stakeholders as well as technical team to bring them on the some common platform to conduct some discussions related to architectural diagram or the future course of actions. Okay, so that's basically all about your design phase. In the development phase, in this many people would say the business analyst has no role once the solution starts developing, because after that they may not have any what we call a role to play once the requirements are fully designed. But that's not true. Your role is there throughout the life cycle. In the development phase, basically what happens is, once the subsystem and modules are identified and defined, The releases are planned based on the requirement priority and the resource availability. So based on that, the requirements are allocated to different teams and it is developed. It is depending on the size of the project. If it is a small project, maybe it is only one team. If it is a large project, there could be multiple teams working on a multiple part of the solution. Okay. And some stakeholders or the business priorities are specified while planning for the project release. This is important. We will address that in detail at later stage. Once the architectural diagram is presented and approved, we also need to consider the stakeholder and the business priorities before we plan for the releases, and based on that the releases are planned and built. Software system is built in the release or iteration or the module wise. It simply means the solution is built through integrated project and solution, and software coding, communication, hardware is basically done unit by unit. Okay, so it's all about coding and communicating with the hardware, and communicating also with other what we call interfaces are also done. And once the particular unit is built, it has been tested by the technical team itself. Okay, the testing is not done at this stage, it will be done at later stage by another team. Okay, testing team. Each of these unit could be small functionality or the process or the piece of code. Each unit is tested, integrated and retested, that is a regression testing, in a systematic manner by the software engineer. This is what exactly I mentioned, because when you build any changes to do it, again you test it. That keeps happening till you introduce the new changes in that particular software or the code. Okay. Once the software is tested, it is assembled with hardware and retested the entire module. Now this is basically development happening the unit by unit, and in the integration, once the execution level solution is built with one or more modules and integrated successfully, it is shifted to the testing or sandbox environment. This is what we do the integration. Once few modules or few units are built and they are basically they can be basically put them together and can be tested end to end. Some testing can be done. For example, one entire functionality can be done like that. Before transferring the code into the sandbox environment, the additional work related to integration testing must be completed. That is, in addition, it needs to be presented, verified and validated by the technical team on the business, technical and quality related criteria. That it is an optional again, because sometimes the users are busy, so they want to basically test only after the testing team completes the test. Okay. But sometimes the stakeholders are also want to basically see how it may look like this solution, and if they have any particular preferences in terms of the look and feel, functionality and any changes, they may also get involved in the development phase. These qualities related criteria could be software quality defined by the internal or external or both the entities. Okay. The internal, it could be you may have an internal testing team. If you are obtaining the accreditations or certifications, then you may have some external team coming and testing the solution. Then it comes to the testing phase. The testing phase, as we all know, it's a testing team must ensure that module is tested against its business, technical and quality related criteria specified in the functional requirement document using various testing methods. Now at the end of the training we will learn the testing methods, but those are basically they will test the functionality, they will test the data, they will test the end-to-end process, and they may test also the look and feel and other part also. Okay. Any bugs or issues are identified must be reported, fixed and validated for the quality after that. Okay, so you may identify the testing team, if they identify any bugs, issues, and then they will make a list of them, and those are basically communicated to the development team, and development team will fix them. A testing team will again test them, and if once they are fixed and it has been verified by the testing team, then they will provide the sign off. Okay, that is important. This is basically this testing was ensuring that solution is technically good. But UAT is, that is user acceptance test, is basically for users to test. So there the testing is slightly different. User acceptance testing is planned and conducted, and its results are provided to the technical team to work on if any requirement is not working or not in line with the requirements specified in functional requirement document. This is important now. Okay, the issues, fixes and related result in the UAT are further verified and documented. Now the users have to basically test it from the user perspective, how they will interact with the solution in terms of the step-by-step particular process, in terms of end-to-end process, or particular test the particular functionality, what kind of a data they expect, what kind of business rule they may apply. So all those things they will basically test it from their perspective. Again, within the user also, every there may be different users involved in the testing based on their roles and the responsibilities, and they may also test from their perspective. Okay, so once the users are satisfied, they may give you sign off. Okay, so that is basically, once the users give you sign off, then system can undergo the certification and accreditation process. This is basically before the implementation. So this you can the service provider or the technical team can basically provide this as certification accreditation to the business stakeholders. Then comes to the implementation phase. In the implementation phase, the pre-deployment, that is the transition requirements, are defined, and then they are developed and integrated with the solution before the solution is deployed in the user community or the operations or the production environment. So you could have the user community means where the user will interact with the solution. If it is application website, then it has to be website is live, right? So the users start using it. If it is operations, then it is basically implemented in the production environment or the operations, so that it is available for the users to use it. Okay, but before implementation phase, there may be some requirements are there that are required. Those are the requirement also need to be basically taken care of. That in the BABOK it is mentioned as a transition requirement. You may need additional code for what we call developing an interface, or you may need additional a process for data conversion, or and so that two systems can communicate with each other, like that. Deployment phase continues till the system settles down in the user community. For settling down, the reported bugs, issues are fixed, tested and validated for smooth operations. Remember that when the solution is developed in the development environment and tested in the testing and the sandbox environment, at the time they are basically they may use some limited records and limited what we call user experience. But when it is implemented in the production environment or the user community, at the time it will be exposed to the all the data and also all the behaviors that the users may have. Users may I mean various types of interactions also that users may basically try out with the system. Okay, typically it may take up to 3 months for the solution to settle down in the user community. That is depending on the solution and its complexity. It could be earlier or it could be even later as well. Okay. The deployment phase completes when the solution is fully functional and no new issues and the bugs are reported, and the existing the bugs which were reported or the issues were reported, that have been taken care of, and then it translates into the smooth operations. Okay, so that's the basically implementation phase. Then comes to your operation and maintenance phase. Question: okay, I believe there are no questions, so I'll go to the next level, that is operation and maintenance phase. Operation and maintenance phase is monitored on ongoing basis for the solution's performance specified in the business requirement document. So and at the time, at later stage, you may come across the solution may have some limitations, or the organization may have limitations, right? If the solution have some limitations, or the sorry solution may have more the features and functionalities, or there were some features or functionalities were not taken in the first phase, or they were not part of the baseline due to some prioritization issue or funding or the timeline issue. So at the time when the solution goes into the operation, you may basically review those desired category requirement to see if the solution can be enriched and enhanced to make it more effective and efficient on ongoing basis. And this is important because if we don't update and enrich and enhance, then solution can become outdated soon. So in order to keep it relevant, it has to be updated on ongoing basis. Okay, and also if there are any other technical issues are there, they also need to be taken care of. These enhancements come from various sources such as high priority requirement categorized as out of scope, yes, desired category, that is, low priority requirements or new changes required to accommodate, or the need to replace due to increase in the capacity to accommodate the new situation and demand. So you may find there could be various changes may be introduced, and that also can be basically considered as a part of the maintenance project or part of new enhancement. Okay, the changes, the change or the new enhancement may enter into planning phase depending on the size, risk and complexity of the initiative. Okay, once it enters into the planning phase, it will go through every phase mentioned in the solution life cycle after the planning till the operation and till the operations and completes the cycle. So any new initiative or any new features or functionalities you are introducing, it will be also considered as a mini project, and it will go through all those cycles, what all the phases what we have just gone through. This enrichment and enhancement continues as long as the system has ability to adapt to the new organizational need on a continuous basis. So it depending on the solution needs and solution it is relevance, it may stay in its life cycle. Some longer it stays there, the more the beneficial. Okay, once the solution becomes obsolete due to outdated technology or the business need, the solution may be decommissioned or orderly terminated. Okay, so this is what we talk about it. Now the next phase we talk about is decommissioning or the termination phase. This is the last phase, means inception till the termination. So this basically takes care of entire end-to-end cycle. Decommission is a termination phase done in an orderly manner. Remember, it is done in an orderly manner. It requires fulfilling organization, local, federal and federal standards to preserve important data, information and documentation. The preserved data may be utilized if needed in future and can be easily retrieved. So the data must be organized and structured before archiving it. So important part you need to remember is that it can be easily retrieved. It can be easily retrieved. So the data must, and you can't just discard the customer data or the other operational data, because due to the audit and other regulatory requirement, you need to archive them. In India, if you see that accounting data must be preserved for 7 years, and after that there is no legal obligation for like that. And sometimes the organization may not want to go ahead with the solution, but they may want to basically use that customer data and other data in basically introducing the new services or the products. Okay, that is also possible. So that is an organization need. The business analyst must perform the return on investment to validate the estimated business case against the actual business case. Now, this is important, during this termination phase, you may want to revisit the business case to see what was projected in terms of the benefits and the risk, and what was actual benefits of the particular solution, and how it was been realized. These are the important factor we need to consider. Okay, and once we know this is how the benefits have been realized, then we can basically see if there is any variance between the benefits realization. For example, what we projected and what was actual benefits. If there are in the huge variance between the expected and the actual, then we can basically further analyze them. What were the reasons why the benefits were not realized as expected? And if it is exceeded the expectations, it could be also basically a case study for others to basically refer how the benefit has been realized and exceeded the expectation. What are the factors we contributed to the success of the particular solution or particular project, right? So that could be also considered as a success story, and this can be archived in a project library. The ROI and the business case validation and other data related to technical and business issues can be sent to the project library to archive under the lesson learned if it is underperformed, or success story if it is what we call overperformed, you can say, for the future reference. The unique issues or the situation related risk management, change management, scope management, also the needs to be archived in the lesson learned. Now, during the life cycle, you may come across many of the issues about how the change was implemented, how it was basically handled, how the scope changed, or any other related the details you think it is important for other team members to refer, that can be documented. Okay. This is the basically we talk about the SDLC or software development lifecycle in general. Okay. Any questions you have?